Hi, everyone. The topic for this week is special education advocacy and supporting families in special education. So looking at our objectives for the week, we're going to discuss what advocacy means in a larger sense and why it's important. Then we're going to look at how to build partnerships with families, how to support them through the IEP process and empower them with resources. And then we'll look at some effective strategies for advocacy on behalf of our students and their families. Now we're going to start with understanding advocacy. So advocacy in special education involves speaking up for and supporting students with disabilities to ensure that they receive the appropriate educational resources and services. This is what I would tell you is the most basic purpose of advocacy in special education. Some may ask, like, why is this even a topic that we discuss? And we really have to look at the contextual pieces of it. Big picture, many of you might be aware of it at this time, is that there was a very long period of history where individuals with disabilities did not have access to educational rights, and or the education that they were provided was subpar, if that. And through the efforts of parental advocacy and professional advocacy, different levels of advocacy, those rights were better established. Parameters for what education is and should be for individuals with disabilities are better established primarily because of advocacy. Lots of different levels of advocacy and lots of people advocating for better rights and access to education. There is an actual reason that we really still need to be aware of the importance of advocacy and then also how to be advocates. And so we're going to look at this a little further, and we're going to break advocacy down into three main categories. And this is, again, more specific to special education, though it does also span other parts of education. So the first being self-advocacy. If you work in the world of transition, preparing students to move from school to community and adult life, self-advocacy is something that we talk about quite a bit. And you're probably talking about self-advocacy or maybe a word like self-determination with your students quite a bit, and at much younger grades as well. This is something that's happening throughout many of the grades, from littles to all the way adults. When we look at self-advocacy in this sense, we are we're talking more about encouraging students to speak up for themselves. This is actually an incredibly crucial level of advocacy. Who better to speak up for what I need than me? Because it's about me. I'm the one who really should be able to speak up and say what I need, right? This is a far easier principle than practice, and that's okay. It's something that every individual will work on as their lives continue. For our students with disabilities, we harp on this so much because it's something that gets pushed to the background, because we're also focused on getting you to read better, getting you to do math, getting a million things happening, and learning to speak up for oneself is not something that is always at the center of attention. However, knowing this is actually, or not just knowing that self-advocacy is important, learning how to be a good self-advocate, those are just such incredible skills that will carry an individual far outside of the school system, in and out of different settings that they might come to interact with and be a part of. And then just a note for keeping in mind, or something to keep in mind, when I say speaking up for oneself, I am not necessarily or only including verbalization. Any level of communication, if possible, is appropriate in self-advocacy. If the only way I can communicate is through an AAC device and pre-recorded sentences, or somebody made a video of me doing the work and overlaying text or voice to it, and it gets the gist of what it is that the individual is trying to communicate or trying to advocate for, that is all perfectly acceptable types of self-advocacy. And this is, of course, as communicative as possible for each individual person. But an important level of advocacy nonetheless would be self-advocacy. And this is for us as well. Every individual might be more of an American idea, but every individual really does benefit from self-advocacy or needs it and works on it as their lifetimes continue. Next, we have parent advocacy. And as I'm sure you know, advocacy is incredibly important. Parents advocating for their children's needs are the first line of defense in getting that child, that student of yours, the level of support that they need. Parents, and statistically more likely to be moms in the education systems, are the ones who begin the communication journey to getting services. So even if the teacher or the school is the one that identifies that a student may need special education services or further support or something different than what they're currently getting, we communicate that to the family first, if available, when we can, however we can. And if there is a family unit or a parental unit, more often than not, again, statistically, we are talking to moms. And so moms are like this huge part of advocacy. Also, all parents, all family members, but the primary individual that we go to in parent advocacy is the person that becomes our main line of communication to getting the student what they need, how to communicate that information with them is extremely important. And so it becomes incredibly important as well for parents to understand that their child has a right to a certain level of education and quality of education and services. They need to know what the minimum expectation, if my child has a disability, and that means that they are entitled to XYZ. Now, what is a reasonable expectation for my individual child that is within the world of XYZ? Now, how do I access those services? How do I now make sure that when the student gets that speech service that they need, my child gets that speech service that they need, that it is a quality level of service? This is all coming on the parent side of things, the family side of things. How they come to find all this information is like a big roller coaster. And that is where also professional advocacy comes in. So this is us as teachers. Professional advocacy plays such a key role in the success of our students, in the support of their family members. Professional advocacy is like this huge, wonderful need, and we do it all the time without actually maybe knowing that that's exactly what you would call it or label it, right? Teachers, educators, people who work within the school system and know it just at a different level than a parent who doesn't work in education would. We understand these systems and know that they are complex, and we also know how to at least get the process started to get support or to get that extra service that's required. And it makes us really well positioned to help be this bridge in advocacy for our student and families and the school. As the teacher in these situations, a special ed teacher, you are likely the representative that the families and parents have immediate access to. You're like this first line of, well, who do I talk to? I'm going to talk to the teacher because that's the main person I know. They work for the school. They might be able to help point me in the right direction if they can't give me the answer themselves. That is where I would say the first step is for a lot of families. Students have teachers. That makes sense to them to talk to you first because you are more than likely someone that's generally easier to contact. As a trained professional, and sometimes it doesn't feel like we have all the training and the knowledge in the world, but you definitely have more than a lot of people. So you are the trained professional. You are someone who has knowledge and also knowledge of the school system and what your student needs and what might be possible within the world of special education, and also an understanding of the inner workings of the system. So if the parent comes to you and says, and this is not out of the realm of possibility, the parent says, I think my student really needs physical therapy. And maybe they do, and maybe they don't, but because you work in the system that the parent requested it, legally, we have to pursue this. So I, being the special ed teacher who's been trained to do this, will now have to get the process started to try to get an assessment done. It might require lots of different steps. It certainly does require a lot of different steps, but you're the person, or you're going to communicate with the person at your school or your district who's going to get this process going. This is our role in navigating these complex systems. It doesn't mean that we know everything, but it also does mean that we generally know who to contact when we need that support in advocating these systems, because parents, unless they work in the educational system, they don't know what all paperwork needs to be done. They don't know who to contact at the district to get this thing started or what needs to be submitted, and all the little nitty gritties. Those come from us as the first line of defense of the school system, but also we're the first people to get that process started for the most part. Not always, but for the most part. And sometimes being this bridge between the family and the school can be awkward. You can get stuck in a situation where you're right in the middle. I agree with the family saying, however, I work for the school and the school is saying no. And the district is saying they don't have the money. And now I'm in this weird place of what do I do? This is also something that is maybe not uncommon in the world of special education and professional advocacy. Regardless, even when things are awkward, there are so many benefits to effective advocacy. When done with intention and fidelity, professional advocacy can lead to a promotion of educational outcomes. This is effective advocacy really correlates with improved educational outcomes. And as an example of this, if I'm advocating for my student, Evelyn, to have a new AAC device because the last one that they've had, or the one that they've had, is now 6 years old, and whenever they press a response, the lag is so long that the class discussion has moved on. Even though they have the right answer, even though they're trying to participate, whatever the situation may be, this device is just not it anymore. It's not working for a student and for the needs anymore, or they've outgrown it, or they're ready to do something else, or ready to move on to another thing. And unless you, other educators, providers, speak up and say something or make the moves to support the student in getting the newer version of this AAC device or the next level of support, even though they're going to talk to you about budget and all this other stuff. Your job is to advocate moving that forward. And it might be a tedious process, and it might be getting a lot of no's, and then you got to keep pursuing a bit until finally a change happens. And even if that change is just moving the scale a tiny bit forward, I'm a general proponent that a tiny bit forward is better than nothing. Not that that's like acceptable, tiny bits are acceptable for level of support. It depends on what the child needs, but it is better than remaining stagnant. It's better than not having things said out loud or put into writing the right way. And because when we are able to make those things happen and move forward, we are seeing educational outcomes improve for students. It might sound a little convoluted, but I promise you it makes a difference. Effective advocacy also helps strengthen family engagement. And this is always a piece of the puzzle that you're going to hear about as an educator, right? Family engagement is so important, and it is so important. Families who are engaged in the process of their child's education have a direct correlation to student success, right? The more a family believes, a family unit, the parent, all of them individual believe that the child will be able to succeed, then that student is more likely to succeed because now they got a bigger belief system. Engaging families in this is not always the easiest thing. Sometimes you're battling a lot of things, your work schedule, their level of understanding. However, your connection to families is strengthened, even if it's little by little, when they know you're on their side, when they see or understand that you are trying to support that student. And sometimes it's not clearly stated, and sometimes it goes completely unrecognized. Even in those situations when you are making sure that your students are receiving what it is that they need, and then you're trying to ensure that any interaction you have with the family, however limited or however many times you have them, that they are comfortable, that they're secure, and that the direction that their child's educational progress is going, and that their services and their needs are being honored appropriately, that they are being heard, and the concerns are being addressed as possible. Again, not everything is possible, but when possible. These things make such a big difference for the family. And even again, when not known or appreciated by the family, it makes a very big difference for the student. And at the end of the day, the education system is built for that student. So it makes a difference. Little by little, barriers break down, and we can strengthen some family engagement, even with our toughest families. And this is something that I don't say lightly, because it many years in the making did it take for a family member to finally say, "Oh, thanks for your help." It was amazing after 4 years of us battling all the time. But eventually things get better with families. They do. Hopefully. I say that with a lot of optimism. Next, we have boosting student independence as a benefit of effective advocacy from our end, the professional side. So advocacy contributes to enhancing student self-esteem, which wonderful self-esteem is obviously a big indicator of how well we perceive ourselves and are willing to do on things. And it also helps foster independence. So as an example here, imagine that you're working and you're doing your job, you're working your butt off as a teacher, and your paycheck for the month didn't come in. Do you say nothing? Or do you find the right people to talk to and figure that problem out, because you need to get paid? That was your job that you did. Work for free. We love what we do, but we still don't work for free. I'm going to guess that likely your answer is the second one, that you're going to do something about it, right? Because suddenly your needs are not met, and that's not just or fair or reasonable or correct. So this is a generalized example of self-advocacy. This is me advocating for myself. I went to work, I did my job, I did it well, I need to get paid for it, something has gone wrong, we must fix it. This kind of problem happens, hopefully not all the time, but these kinds of things where we have to speak up for ourselves and pursue action, it's self-advocacy, and it helps us individually understand the importance of speaking up. Again, speaking up being a generalized term. It's not just to get what we want, but it's also to ensure that what is being offered or given is right, is fair, is reasonable, is just, is correct. We're not being taken advantage of or forgotten, or whatever the case may be. Knowing that an individual person can make things happen for themselves is incredibly empowering. This concept, at least, and I'm going to put an asterisk on this, in America, it might be quite an American concept. applies to everyone. So in our education system as well, and we teach this quite a bit. How do I know that your pencil is broken if you're in the middle of a test, if you don't say anything, but you just sit there and hold a broken pencil and you can't get the test done? That's a smaller level of self-advocacy, but we need you to say something because I got 30 students. How did I know your pencil was broken? You got to raise your hand and say something. We got it. We can fix that together. And that's a small form of getting what they need and want, being just and fair and correct. So for our students, learning and working on this concept is just so incredibly important. It teaches them how to pursue things on their own or interdependently, meaning they're doing it as dependently as possible with the level of support that they need. And that's okay too. That's a form of independence that is perfectly acceptable. Instead of sitting around or settling for nothing or subminimal standards or hoping or waiting or expecting someone else to do it for us, when the capability exists within ourselves, that is the lesson that just generally is like underneath all those little lessons we try to teach our students. We may not always put it in those words, but hey, you need something, you got to say it out loud. The baby that cries the loudest is the one that gets fed. We don't necessarily want the negative part of that, but we do need our students to understand this level of work. It makes a difference and also boosts their ability to be independent, autonomous individuals. So when we look at the family side of things, we're going to switch over to families for just a bit. We're looking at building effective partnerships with them. And that's, again, much easier said than done. It's so easy we're going to build great partnerships with our families that we work with. And we have 10 families, or students in our classes, and we got to make 10 great partnerships, or 30 or 50, however many you have. And this is not necessarily the easiest thing in the world to do. However, still important, and we have to give it our best effort. Mostly because families know their children differently than we do. We spend 8 hours with them, they spend 12 hours plus with them, and the weekends and all this other time with them. And they know their child differently than we do. We know their child likely differently than their families do. And we need to come together to provide insights to one another. How will we get a better picture, a whole picture as possible if we're not communicating with one another and we're not partnering or strategizing together to best support these students? So one of the strategies that I would tell you to always look at is regular communication. Keeping families informed about their child's progress and any concerns. Especially at the younger grades, there's a lot of systems already built into schools or like very widely used in schools like Class Dojo or whatever other communication system that you have to give regular updates. And that's great because that is establishing a very base, firm way to communicate. We know that not all families engage in those platforms, even if it's required, they don't. And when they do, that's wonderful. And if they don't, instead of maybe ignoring the fact that they don't, try your best to communicate with them in the way that they can. I think instead of being like, well, I put it on Class Dojo and it's not my fault you didn't read it. It's true. Definitely not your fault that they didn't read it. But if it's really important to you that the family understands and has this information, then you should maybe just take the extra step, however many times you got to roll your eyes about it, or log into something else to send that message and information over. It's just I know it takes more time out of us, and time is never the thing that we have a lot of, but it would make a very big difference in making sure that you've done your due diligence and also your best work in trying to communicate with families. Active listening is always going to be this big puzzle. And this is the reason I say puzzle. It's active listening is a skill we have to work on for every single interaction. Often, at least in my head, when somebody's talking, I'm preparing my response without having fully heard or processed what is going on. I'm like ready to respond. I think this is a natural way for people to communicate. It happens when you're excited sometimes, or when you're upset sometimes. Lots of different reasons for that. However, the active listening portion is waiting. Waiting is the first step of active listening, in my opinion, of you have to wait for someone to finish their thought, however long or slow that thought may come out through. Give yourself a couple of seconds before jumping over to a response. And that can sometimes mean reiterating a bit of what they have said, ensuring that you understood that what they have said, even if you totally feel like you have, making sure that they understood, they have this sense of, I heard you, and now I'm going to respond. Showing empathy as much as possible. Again, sometimes really difficult to do when we're in the middle of teaching and grades are due and progress reports are due next week. And I've been trying to contact you for 6 months and now you're finally talking to me and oh my gosh, and what's been going on. And it's hard to make room for empathy when you can remember it, expressing it or allowing for empathy and understanding that we don't live in that family's house and we don't know what is happening at all their levels. And if this is the only time we finally get to communicate, then I'm going to do my best to communicate with empathy. And my last piece here, it's not on the slide, but it's on the notes of the slide. If you ever look at those, is consistency, being reliable and following through on comments. So as a little story, it's very well known in my family that if you say something out loud, I want to learn how to play the piano, then you golly got to go learn how to play the piano. We know in general that we do not say things unless we mean it. And the reason for that is because then my parents will come every day and ask you how your piano progress is going. You said you were going to do it, so do it. They're waiting for you to do it. And they're not expecting you to be the best. But if you said you're going to do something, they're going to hold you to your word and you better do it. And this is something I probably would have told you was the most annoying thing as a kid, but also has really been a lesson to teach me the importance of communication. Or if I said I'm going to do something, then I will do it, especially when I became a teacher and then had expectations for communicating with families that I didn't really understand when I first accepted my job. I thought, get to work with kids, this is great. And I wasn't always thinking about the family piece. And I got caught in these situations, especially my first year or two, to say, like, oh, after the IEP meeting, I'll send you some notes or I'll send you a link to that really good resource, and then forget about it. And it just that forget, even though they may not follow up with you and all this other stuff, it shows that empty words are coming out of this teacher's mouth. And a behavior that's self-corrected, I want to say relatively quickly, but especially when talking to stakeholders and other important people in my job and everything, if I told you I'm going to get it done, then I will get it done. And I will get it done to you by the time I said I was going to get it done. This is also something I would call my general work style. Don't ask me to do anything before I said I was going to get it done, but if I told you it was going to be done Wednesday, it will be in your hands by Wednesday. Don't ask me about it Tuesday, but you're going to get it on Wednesday. And that is an important skill and something, I think, not just skill, an important note practice for all teachers, special ed and not. If you say you're going to do something, especially in communicating with families, you better go do it. Along with that, we get some communication techniques. Of course, we know effective communication is important. It's the key to so many things. A part of effective communication is understanding and respecting who it is we're talking to and their cultural and linguistic backgrounds. So at the most basic level of linguistic diversity is if the family that I speak to or where I'm working with are primary speakers of another language, and this is the one that they're most comfortable in communicating with, then we're going to need an interpreter. And interpreting is not, it doesn't make for like smooth conversation all the time. Sometimes it's perfect, it's no big deal. And other times it's a little watchy and stilted and it takes a long time, and that's okay. As long as the information is being communicated and understood by both parties, that is what matters the most. Making sure that people have the ability to communicate and understand in the language that they can is incredibly important. And that I know it seems crazy, and maybe it's not such a big deal in California as much because there's a lot more diversity here. However, in lots of other places in the world, in the country, you'd be shocked at how they can't even find a Spanish speaker to help communicate. It becomes a big problem. And so meaning that there's a lot of families that don't get any level of information that they can access or access easily within their own language. Part of the cultural side of things is understanding at least the big basics of our individual students and their families' cultures. This is incredibly important for teaching, for making sure that inclusion exists and that they are understood. And we see this a lot in the world of transition, I'm sure many other places in special education. Understanding the general expectation that our students' culture has for them is such an important thing because it will really help you understand what expectation is that the family holds. And if you understand that better, then we have a way to communicate and a way to make sure that we are meeting the school version of things and the family version of things, and that meeting point is where the students are successful. So as an example, you'll hear a lot about like individualistic and collectivistic cultures. So individualistic cultures are those that are more American, where we value the I, individual growth. I'm going to be this when I grow up, and I'm going to live in a mansion all by myself, and awesome, great. And we talk about those things with students all the time. What do you want to do? What are your plans for the future? And that's a totally normal conversation that we see in schools and with students all the time. And then some students may go home and they come from a culture that is not about the I, it's about the we. we as a family succeed together. We expect you to take over the family business. We expect you to, after graduating from high school, you're going to be full-time caretaker to your younger siblings until you get married, until whatever the next step is. We expect you to live at home until you're 47, whatever the deal may be. That is a part of their culture, a part of their expectation. And sometimes those ideas come at odds because the student lives in both for the most part. They live in like the individualistic American side. They're going to American school, they're learning all these things, and then they go home and there's a different expectation, and that they can butt heads at times, and we can get stuck in there trying to help situate these things. Not necessarily easy, but understanding that different expectations may exist because of cultural backgrounds and differences from our own and from what the school in general is talking about or expecting is incredibly important. It will make a huge difference in how you communicate and how you understand the families that you are working with. Something else to note with that is religious backgrounds are also quite important. Understanding that, let's say we're in Ramadan right now, and I'm trying to make a call home, and this is just all the only time that I can call, but they never pick up. We never get to talk because the other times I'm working or whatever the situation is. But you may not have known that the student and their family in that time that you can communicate, it's when they're praying or when they are breaking their fast, excuse me, whatever the case may be. Understanding the religious aspect of some families and their backgrounds is incredibly important, something we should keep in mind as well. Next part is a lot simpler. It's encouraging clear and jargon-free language. As you probably know by now, the world of special education is acronyms. We love our acronyms. And sometimes it's like, what am I going to spell IEP out every single time? That's crazy. When you're communicating with families, with students, with anybody who does not work in special education, please just spell it out. Even if it feels crazy, even if your hand is cramping a little bit, speech to text it, whatever you need to do, spell it out. Do not use the acronym. You can maybe put the acronym in parentheses, but spell it out every single time. If a word is unknown, if a process is unknown, provide the definition. Just because you does not at all mean that anyone else knows it. Unless you know that all your coworkers in that school have gone through the same process in education that you have, taken all the same classes. And if they're not special educators, they probably haven't, then they don't know what we have to have an eligibility means. Explain what the word eligibility or what the term eligibility meeting is. What does that mean? And yes, it might be annoying and tedious at times, but I would highly encourage you to get into that practice. The more that you are able to provide clear and again, jargon-free language or definitions for when jargon is there, easier it is for others to understand, and especially parents to understand what it is you're talking about. If you just go in and say, we're going to order some AAC devices and it's called Perlico and it's going to be great, you're going to love it. I heard two big words or two things in there. I have no idea what you're talking about. What is an AAC device? Say it out loud. Give me an example. What is Perlico? What is that? That's an app. What does it do? Give me an example. Tell me. This is what clear communication is. It may seem so obvious to some and tedious to others, but I promise you it is something that we fall into and just don't really make a great effort to explain and to support families in understanding this. We just have an expectation that lots of others know it. Ensuring accessibility through multiple communication means. This is a pretty simple one in the sense of providing various methods of contact helps ensure inclusivity and hopefully seamless communication with your families. Again, sometimes your school is using a program, and if that works, that's awesome. And just being very consistent on it is very important. However, that might not be the method that works best for the families that you work with, and you might need to communicate in a different way. Not knowing what the right way is, ask what the right way is. Even for my high school adult students, I would send home that slip of paper that says, what's your parents' phone number? What's your email? Which way do you want me to contact? And my students would like want to fill it out and give it right back to me and be like, no, give this to your parent. Come back tomorrow, please. I would beg my students, like, please bring it back to me. I need it in your mom's handwriting. I need her to see it, or parent or grandma or whoever. And I think when you're a little bit weird about like, please, I just need to make sure this is from your parents so that I can talk to them. It makes a difference. And you're more than likely to get the right number or a new number, or that they actually just prefer email and they're great at texting. Don't call them, whatever the situation may be. It makes a difference. And when you're able to ask, we may not always get an answer, but we give it our best effort to figure out what the right way to communicate with individual families is. Supporting parents in the IEP process, as you may know, is incredibly important. Again, unless parents work in the special ed world, they don't have the same procedural professional background that you do. And some may totally, and they may surpass you in the knowledge that they have. And others have learned it through the pits because they've had all the negative experiences and they know it all because of the hard route that they've had to go through. Others are brand new and don't know. Others have been in the process for a long time, but haven't really faced any obstacles, but they still don't really know all that much about this process. We as educators are supposed to, but also should be supporting by explaining each step, ensuring that parents and families understand their rights and preparing them for meetings, not just saying we have a meeting. We are preparing parents for meetings. So the first is facilitating parent understanding. So by helping parents understand what each section of the IEP means, even if it's a section we don't even really talk about, just explain what it means. And if you don't necessarily feel like explaining it every single time, write it down, make a little guide, find a guide that's already been created online, share that with them, make sure it's appropriate to what it is that you're doing, but share it with them. Make sure that they have the information available. That having information available is so incredibly important. We cannot necessarily expect parents to find it all on their own. Sometimes because they don't know what to look for, other times because they don't have the time, other times because they didn't know it was that important and they should have. And now they're in a meeting where we're all yelling about what a number of hours and they're like, what is happening? We need to be able to explain these things and make sure that they have access to it before IEP meetings occur. So when I send home before the IEP meeting a draft copy, I'm also going to staple that piece of paper to it or add a link to it that says you can learn about each section right here. When we get into supplemental services, that means, and here's a little definition I wrote, and now I share this with every parent. Oh, here's a great video that explains it all. Whatever it is you're able to find and use, and maybe you make it yourself, it needs to be given to the families every single time, no matter how annoying it is. You have to do it. It makes a difference. Whether or not they're going to tell you it makes a difference, it's better to have access to the information than no access at all. Encouraging families to write down any questions that they have, concerns that they have. Maybe in that same piece of paper, you give them space and lines to say like, questions. I don't understand. Where do I find information about sentence starters and have them fill it out? Just giving them the space and the ability to know that they should be asking questions and they can ask questions and what to do with them when they have them. Empowering parents during that meeting, so what to do with the questions when they have them, is not as hard as you think. It's like your easier meetings and we're just going to roll right through this and we only ask the parents once, do you have any questions? And they say no, then we're good to go, sign off on this. Not quite like that. What we're going to do is take a breather after the main big sections that we're going to cover and say, now that you heard about this, are there any questions? And the parent, again, may not have questions in the moment. That's okay. As we're going through, feel free to write anything down or record it or think about it later. You can always email me and I will answer any questions that you have or make sure that I can get you the right answers or can get you to the person that will help you with those answers. And that makes a difference too. Just letting them know periodically, especially during the meeting, not just once, but periodically during the meeting, that they can take a breather and they can ask any questions and then, or that they can continue to reach out and continue that conversation after the meeting. That is important. Letting parents know what is going to happen at the meeting, especially those of you who are working with parents who are new to the world of IEPs, who are generally still confused about this process, but they know they got to come to the school once a year and they trust the teacher. Great. Still allowing them the space and the time to voice their concerns, to ask the questions, to know what is going to come up and that they're not being side blinded by the whole IEP process. Because sometimes it feels like they're being side blinded because we didn't tell them we're going to talk about attendance and attendance is a real big issue and we didn't prepare them ahead of time and now they're being attacked. Not what we're going to do. We're going to make sure that they know what's going to be covered and what we got to talk about at this meeting. Next, we have ensuring inclusive participation. And this is, again, there is a section in the IEP that says parent concerns. So we're supposed to ask what the parent concerns are. It's not just like, hey, do you have any concerns? No, cool. It is at any point that we talk to the parents prior to the IEP meeting throughout the school year, and they're expressing concerns to us, that their concerns are heard, are documented, and are addressed. And sometimes it's small. Why did my son get a C on this? I got you. I heard you. Let me look into it. I'll make sure that math teacher calls you and follow up with you about why the student's grade is like this. And then you document that. But that is really important. And that is a portion of ensuring parent participation goes far beyond the IEP meeting. It includes all the portions of the IEP that happen before and after the IEP. The same thing goes for students. As they get older, their becomes really important in the IEP process. But then again, might be an American thing. So when we look at empowering parents and making sure that they know what is what is expected, what is reasonable, what is how to access these high quality services and education. First thing we're going to do is provide educational resources. And this can come local, this can come things that you've created, these can come from the state, the district, whatever the situation may be. We're going to provide these resources. Sometimes it's as great as just having a list of resources that you've accumulated over the years and you update it as you go on. You put it in your Google Classroom, anybody can access this. You make sure your parents have a link to it. You print it out for the parents who don't have internet. You're not really sure that they're accessing it. And you send it home because it has really good information on like food pantries, or public health system does a free dental healthcare check once a month at different community centers and they can sign up. Lots of other things. You put this information, you gather this information. Teachers are very natural hoarders of resources. We learn about it, we kind of sit somewhere, file on our computer, paper on our desk, thing that we were like just know in our head is like a thing that exists that our students can benefit from. Instead of just having it somewhere in your head or in your computer, we're going to put it on a list, and we're going to have that list kind of be an ever evolving list of resources. And we have this great ever evolving list. We can share it with all the other teachers. Maybe they have really good resources and we put them in there too. We take all the good things and we share all the good things. Resources are for sharing. With people to go to would be counselors, psychs, social workers. They have the best resources. You talk to them. Your PTs, your OTs, your speech therapists, they have great resources. You talk to them, you make a collective one. Your district might already have some listed out for you. The state already has some listed out for you. You gather what is relevant to your students, to your families, and then you continuously update that and make it available. Yes, they can also themselves try to find this information, but isn't it, again, you're the first person that they're likely to talk to, or you may be the first person to know that the student's grandfather passed away and they're not dealing very well with it at the school side. And we're like talking to the school psych and all this other stuff. There's free counseling services for people who live in the community. And I'm going to share this information with the family. Just make sure that they have it. Not saying you got to sign them up, but here's some good info you might really benefit from. Or the public library does support, grieving support, or things like that they can access. And they go to the library all the time. They just didn't know it was there. Things like that. Offering practical workshops. This is like a little twofer that I like to call. School districts will sometimes do workshops. If you don't know if your school does one, you haven't heard of them doing one, offer it. Record it for families, put it on YouTube, send it out to them. The reason I say it's a twofer is that you do this, right? And sometimes we do it because we know it's important. We do it for our families regardless. But then for your professional benefit, you're going to go and make sure whoever your admin is understands this. When you do like an annual evaluation, they're like, what kind of parent engagement are you doing? It's like, oh, I record workshop videos on understanding the IEP process. And I did it in English, and then I had my co-teacher do it in Spanish. And I had my other teacher do it in families, Vietnamese community, whatever community, like communities you may be working with. Also had one of our students even help us, and they did it in sign language for their parents and became a big part of their thing. Wonderful. You better document it, put it on your resumes. You are doing things that make such a big difference, even if it says you've gotten 6 views, and 4 of those are just you watching it to make sure it's good. The other 2 are from families who actually used it, who took a minute to look at it, who maybe learned something that they didn't, or know that that now exists. Make or host a workshop. Trust me, it makes a difference, but not just makes a difference. You want it to be known for your professional benefit to others in your school, in your district. This teacher is doing some work that's really reaching out to parents. Trust me. Don't sell yourself short on the work that you're doing. All right, and then fostering informed advocacy, connecting families to support groups, to other parents, to all of the great people. You're fostering communities is really what I'm trying to say here. You've been a teacher for 2 years. It means that you have families from last year, and now you have families from this year, and you are the connection. Doesn't mean you're going to give out information. Oh, here's their personal phone number. You call them. What we're going to do is say, might know somebody who can help or who might be able to offer some information about their personal experience with this from a parent perspective. I'm going to reach out to them and see if they'd be willing to talk to you about it. And then you go and you talk to the parents from last year and say, like, hey, I have a new family, student with Down syndrome. They're not really sure what to do, and they seem to really just kind of communicate with others. Would you be willing to do that? Or do you know of any resources or people who would be willing to do that with this family? I think you would be surprised how often families are willing to talk to each other. They don't just know each other naturally. Sometimes they'll meet each other in different spaces and whatnot, but you can be this really great connect because you many families from all your previous years teaching or this current year, and you can work to link people together. You have to be the link, but also this is something that you'll put on your resume. You foster community within families, you call it something, or just like whatever it is you need to do. If you need help on the resume part, you call me. I will happily help you. But because I know the teachers are doing this work all the time and they're not documenting the amount of work that they're doing, that really makes such a big difference. Same, I'm going to say, goes for students. You taught lots of students, and if you have a student who went to college last year, and then you have a student who this year wants to go to that same college, and they need to access disability services and so forth and so on. I mean, if I can get in contact with my student from last year, and if they'd be willing to talk to you about this process, because it's a process. And who better than to talk to you than someone who actually went through it, who also looks like you, who knows what the experience is like as a person who has a disability, who was also a student of mine. You are a great connector. We need to document those things, but also take advantage of the connections you have. Okay, for advocacy strategies, look at three main ones, and main is the best word here. First things first, for you as a teacher, observing and documenting student needs. Like where you start, this is where I would say you start. You are spending time with these students. You see what it is there, how they're communicating that they learn, what this looks like, and what an expectation, what's within their realm of normalcy, what's within their expectation, like a grade level expectation, their age, their social level, and documenting when they're not meeting those markers. So not just observing, we're documenting it and noting that are these needs and do these needs need to be addressed on our end or maybe communicated on school administrators. So if you are the first person that the parents are going to come out to or talk to, administrators would probably be the next one. And when you know that there is something that needs to be communicated, we go to our school administrators. We'll have to bring the issue to the next level. We're unfortunately not able to fix it all on our own. Unfortunately, we shouldn't have to fix it all on our own. But when it's a problem that's outside of my realm of control or needs more input, then I'm going to take it up to the next level. And that's an actual strategy for advocacy, is taking it up to the appropriate next level and suggesting appropriate accommodations and modifications. Again, this is something of your professional eye being able to see that my student requires ABC, and then I'm going to make sure that the powers that be can do it or approve it. We can do it, and we follow the right procedures. Maybe we don't really need to do anything. I just get an okay. Let's do that, no problem. Then we're going to suggest and get permission for and implement the appropriate. And when we're advocating within the school system, what that means is our understanding of the legal frameworks, special education, is different than the parent side of things, certainly, and different than the district side of things. We don't work necessarily as the lawyers who have to deal with all this and the people who work in legal and have to figure out the little teeny tiny things, but we definitely do know what the legal requirements are for our students, for ourselves as special ed teachers, people who need to write IEPs, who need to make sure that these things are seen through. Part of that is being knowledgeable about laws and policies that we are held to and that we are holding others to. Having comprehension knowledge of this is really important, not necessarily in-depth knowledge, but comprehensive, and knowing how to find more information if we need it. This great person who can make what I call fake best friends with people in the school and in the district is incredibly important. When the school itself has the keys to the office that you need, the extra supplies that you need, and making sure that you have a good connection with them, because it ultimately helps your students. It helps you be a better teacher, helps your students, and make sure that you have access to the things that you need. But sometimes you got to make fake best friends with the person who holds that key. Knowing who holds that key is incredibly important, literally and figuratively. Go into utilizing data-driven advocacy. And of course, something we talk about all the time. In order for me to make a change, to stand on my soapbox and be like, no, my student needs a new AAC device, because it's the example we've been going with. My student needs a new AAC device. We have a huge lag in communication, and they can do better than this. We know this. And the way I can tell you that the lag is happening is because it's getting worse, even though their answers are still correct. And I've observed that not to be a issue with their personal communication. Observed it to be an issue with the actual device. And here is the data that I have been to prove that. And here is the data I've been documenting to prove that we need an increase in this service or a decrease in this service or a new service. Taking data, I know, is a thing that's drilled into teachers all the time. It's important when we get to that point of making sure our students have access to the thing that they are needing next or need more or less of. Data will drive progress, school districts have a real hard time saying no to data, at least in this sense, because they've been telling you to take it for so long. You take it and you have the proof now.